days. So hopefully I don't actually blow out any eardrums today. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for inviting me. Always happy. Huh? Yeah, I mean, I can. Okay. I feel like this could end up being quite difficult. What about this? Will this work? Can you guys hear me well enough if I do this? Okay, we'll just do this. Maybe. Okay. That's a great way to start this. Hi, Nicholas Santantonio. I'm the small grains breeder at Virginia Tech. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about potential for malt barley east of the Mississippi. Okay, now this isn't working. Click now? Yeah, the click works. No, it doesn't. Okay. That was an animation that's not going to work apparently. Behind this, I built a map of barley production that shows how much we produce in the eastern U.S., which you all know is clearly the greatest production area. But no, in all seriousness, wow, do we have any other solution here, or are we just gonna? Can I do that? Okay. Okay. I mean, okay, we'll try this. We'll try this. Anyway, so about 90 some odd percent of the production is over in Montana, Idaho, and North Dakota, for malt barley at least. And you'll notice on this drought map, that's a problem. So this was 2021. You all, anyone that was in this area that year is probably very familiar with the catastrophe that resulted. And so you'll notice that if you look at where the Mississippi River is there, and you look to the right of it, there's almost no areas there that are experiencing any significant drought, which is great because the eastern U.S. gets a lot of water. Now, that potentially, right, if we were doing more production there as well, you could see eastern malt being a buffer, right? It's not going to be the largest system, but potentially could be a buffer. I'm not going to hold my breath for that to happen tomorrow, but so I kind of want to talk about what our production system looks like there, what's kind of happened over the last 10 to 15 years, and where we're headed. So traditionally, the barley that is grown in the East is feed types. They are all winter. My program is exclusively winter barley. We also do winter soft wheat, which is our main breadwinner, and winter hard wheat. I think now that Dave Marshall and Myron Fountain have retired, I think we're the only program working on hard wheat too. So at least east of the Mississippi. So this is a forage type that we developed. So forage and feed were one of the most important types for us. This is a forage type. You'll notice that it's probably looks a little different than what you're used to looking at. That is a 6-row compact with no lawns. And if you have this in a field with a bunch of other stuff in there, they will seek this out and they will eat every single head off of it. The deer love it. And so actually it's a real problem because we'll produce populations of these awnless types. And when we do, right, you're advancing them in the field, the deer will come and eat them all. So they're doing really heavy selection for awned off types in our awnless, which has been a problem in the past. So we actually, all of our populations are in 2 locations so that we get, maximize the probability of not losing everything. But yeah, so relative, up until about 15 years ago, there really wasn't much interest in doing any malt production in the area. Barley was a really nice crop to rotate with, to double crop the soybean, because it comes off about 2 to 3 weeks earlier than the wheat does. And because of that, you can get I don't know. I feel like I'm holding the scorpion up here. And because of that, you can get a better soybean crop because you can get your beans in it. But in recent years, we've seen just drastic decline of feed barley because the elevators don't want to mess with it. So there's nowhere for farmers to take it. So none of them are growing it anymore for the most part. And I think, this year, if I recall, I think barley was at like $2.30 a bushel, which is effectively nothing. So uh, we do have a good production area. So winter barley in this is our seed increases. This is last year. So last year was a really unusual year. Our state trials averaged almost 140 bushels an acre, and we had lines that were yielding 170 plus in some locations. And so we can get good yields there. That's a little atypical. Usually we're more around 100. Farmers would be seeing something closer to 80 on average. So we can produce it there. The problem is that you have higher moisture, which means diseases are more of an issue. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Wincy Brooks was the barley breeder for the last 30 years. He recently retired. I wanted to make sure I put him up here because he's not here today. But all of this work in development of varieties for the Eastern US was really led by this man, and he did a fantastic job. And so now that he's retired, I am scrambling to try to make sure that I don't let that program dissolve, right? So we're trying to, keep everything going. And I will say, before I move on, I will just say this real quick. We are going to be hiring a barley breeder at research scientist level. It's not posted yet, but it will probably come out in the next month or so, and I will make sure to send it to Ashley so that she can send it on. Wincy has been quite successful. I think he released 13 or 14 varieties over his time. Some of the more recent ones were so BT Bean was an on the sporage variety that replaced Nomini. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Nomini. Very similar, slightly higher forage yield, a little bit better quality. We also released Greg. Greg is by far the most scab resistant variety we have in our program, and has been used as a source of scab resistance quite a bit. And then 4 years ago now, we released Avalon, which was our first 2-row malt. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the problems with winter barley and then how we got into the malt business. Brian did a good job about talking about how winter injuries are really easy to screen for. Here you can see that there's. Is it the speaker? I don't know where I'm supposed to stand to keep this from happening. So it's incredibly distracting. Winter survival is a thing. We really don't have much of a problem with this in Virginia. Sometimes you see it like that plot right there looks terrible, right? That came back and did fine in the spring. So you can see winter injury that it looks bad, but then you wouldn't notice it 2 months after this. You wouldn't even have known it was there. We do get some diseases that are, I think, more common because of the high humidity levels we have. Although one thing that we have noticed is that we've pushed them so early. The barleys have gotten so early over the years. I mean, we have started barley harvest as early as mid-May. Right, so we plant in October usually-ish, and it used to be that barley would mature somewhere in mid-June. We are, oftentimes starting in May. So we push them so early. I think they're doing a lot of avoidance of some of the worst pests, including Fusarium, which is a problem, and that's really the biggest issue that we face right now in terms of developing a seed product that we can send out there and not have catastrophic failure. There just isn't the same degree, you guys are all familiar, there isn't the same degree of genetic variability for Fusarium resistance of barley as there is in wheat. So those of you that are paying attention will notice that's actually mostly what you're looking at is wheat. but you can see this lighter strip that towards the left, there's about, I don't know, 2,000 or so different barley varieties that are being evaluated for fusarium resistance, and then 5,000 wheat varieties. We can get good scab resistance. It's kind of hard to see in this slide, but those brown heads are not because they are ready. That is fusarium. And so this is almost every single head has it, and many of the heads have almost all of their florets are infected. So we can get it. We have been late planting this lately because we've had some years where barley seems to escape it. What we've done is normally we try to wrap up somewhere around the first week in November at the latest with planting. I save my scab nursery until right before Thanksgiving, and that seems to have it pushed the flowering just a little bit later, giving us a little bit more heat in the spring. And so we get a little bit better infection. And we've had, so last year in particular, there were a lot of programs that had a hard time getting scab, but we got it. And I think part of the reason was because we planted it very, very late that year. I didn't do it this year. My son was due in December, and I decided it was a safer thing to get it in. So if we don't get good scab this year, I'm never going to plant it the normal time ever again. I'll make sure to plant it super late. And we do have resistance. So here's a susceptible line on the left, and you can see there's a resistant line on the right. That's Greg. That line has been used extensively in our program. It's Hollis variety, and it has a very interesting phenotype where the rachis does this like zigzag thing, and so there's a little air channel that is in there, and we don't know if that has anything to do with the resistance or not. But it's kind of one of these speculating maybe. Who knows? Fusarium is such a difficult disease to work with. So if we can grow barley and we can get yields, and we can work on building varieties that are resistant, why can't we do malt in the East? Well, in the late 90s, Anheuser-Busch came to us and to the program was like, hey, can we try this? And so they got some winter stuff and we put it in, and they did some evaluation, and after 1, maybe 2 years, they said, no, this is never going to happen. You're never going to be able to produce malt in the East. They got out of it. But what that did was it kind of instigated Wincy to make some crosses with some malt types. So one of those was Plaisant. A cross between that and a Virginia feed barley ended up resulting in thoroughbred, which is highly susceptible to rust, has moderate resistance to powdery mildew, but in a good year can just really crank out the yield, especially in the mid-Atlantic. And that was released, I think, about 2003. Rick, I'm going to butcher his name, Wasman, contacted us back in around 2007-ish and was like, hey, can we use any of this barley to make whiskey? And I think at the time the answer was no, this isn't going to work. But we tried a few things out, and thoroughbred had, quote, acceptable malt quality. And I put that in quotes because I think that generally that would not be considered acceptable today. But people are still growing it. People are happy with it. It has a very interesting flavor profile when it's malted. It's kind of a smoky thing, but it's not I don't think it's a very pleasant smoky thing. That's just my personal opinion. So we really started in earnest trying to breed malt varieties in 2010. And this kind of corresponded with a bunch of these, malt houses popping up in the East, including Murphy and Root in Charlottesville, Virginia, Proximity Malt in Durham, North Carolina, Epiphany in, Epiphany is in Asheville, Durham. Proximity's in Delaware, and Riverbend is in Asheville. Asheville? Did I get that right? Yeah, okay. All right. And so anyone that has ever worked in a breeding program knows you start off a breeding program, and it's going to be 10 years until you get anything out of it. So it took us 10 years to develop our first malt variety. That was Avalon. It was released in 2020, largely based on very consistent quality measures. So Avalon has done quite well. It is not the highest yielding variety, but it consistently has good malt quality characteristics. One thing that I'm not going to get into this presentation, but I really feel I should mention it, and it's probably the 600-pound gorilla in the room in terms of malt in the East, is pre-harvest sprouting is a big problem. I didn't want to get into it because I have very strong opinions about management practices. And I think that a lot of times the malt barley kind of takes a back seat to other things that are going on at the farm. And so it gets rained on a few times and then, okay, well, yeah, I guess we'll get it out. I feel like if it was really prioritized, that I don't think we would have as much of an issue with the pre-harvest sprouting problem. But anyway, if you want to talk to me about that, I'd be more than happy to. So this is Avalon in North Carolina. This is Perry Farms. I can't remember exactly where it is, to be honest. I was down there. This was 2023. This must have been early April, maybe. Beautiful stand. It really looked great. He had a tiny bit of lodging in one little corner of the field, which had me extremely nervous. But the field just looked wonderful. This was the first year it was really under any significant commercial production. And here it is in Illinois. So this is Riggs Farm. Riggs Brewing Company is in Champaign, but they have a farm that's a little south of there, and so they're growing both thoroughbred and Avalon. And so since when I started, I started Virginia Tech in 2020. I was really interested in working with barley. Wheat is our big main focus. Soft wheat is our big main focus, but I really wanted to do work in barley because I think barley is fun and I really like the community. And so we've really expanded our barley breeding program. For harvest year 2021, we had about 2,000 plots with about 400 lines under evaluation. Last year, we had about 4,000 plots and over 1,000 lines under yield plot evaluation. So really did a pretty big expansion there, about doubled the size of the program. And really kind of the way that you can double the yield plots and triple the number of lines under evaluations, we're using a lot of sparse testing techniques. We have greatly widened that funnel, so we have a lot more entries coming into year one trial, and we select on them real hard moving forward. And we're part of several collaborative nurseries. We currently coordinate the Eastern Malt Barley, which right now we're the only ones that are submitting lines after ARS kind of is in a transitionary period at North Carolina. And but TAN's got some stuff. I think a lot of germplasm got lost, it just kind of got forgotten. But I'm hoping that we can get that going again. And we're always encouraging other people to, submit stuff from the East. I know that Eric has a program, but I think our maturities are just way too different. Is that the big problem, Eric? Yeah. Yeah.
Put it online and now rolling over my stuff and we rely on 5.
Yeah. So yeah, there are complications. I'm really, see, you can't even see this. I lost all of my animations. That's okay. We're really interested in these kind of dual use. So Flavia is an Ackerman line 2-row. We did some evaluation of it here. We worked very closely with them, and it did well here, but it ended up going to Oklahoma for a big cattle operation, and they just grow a ton of this stuff to use as feed. Not this, but Flavia. And it kind of got me thinking about the problem with malt in the East is you're never going to get acreage out of it, which means royalties coming back to the program are going to be almost nothing, which is fine, right? We're making malt varieties because it's fun, not because we're really trying to get the royalties out of it. We subsidize the program with royalties for the soft wheat program. But these are really exciting. These are these 6-row lax heads. You can see how elongated the head is. So they tend to have much plumper kernels than you would get in a typical compact 6-row. And there are some varieties that just yield like gangbusters. And anyone familiar with Marijuana, if you haven't seen that, that's an Ackerman line, and it just cranks it. Super susceptible to scab, but other than that, it's awesome. But I love this head type. So I've been working on some of these, and so we're hoping that we thought this one was going to get released, but then it had some really, for lack of a better term, it really just not as consistent results as we wanted, both yield and for quality. It tended to do good moving south, which is good for us. But yeah, we decided it wasn't quite there yet. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of the program in terms of how much time did I lose to this thing? Oh, quite a bit. So I'm not going to go into too much of this, but I really like to think about a breeding program as two fundamental different things. I think that a lot of times breeders get a little confused. Well, we try to treat a breeding program as one thing, right? But really we're doing two fundamental things. There's a population improvement side of it, and that is, selecting parents and making crosses, doing that thing. But the other thing is the product development side. And developing a seed product is not the same thing as breeding. It's basically, okay, you've already got the line, and now you have to figure out where it lives, what it's susceptible to. Can you make a reasonable product out of it? How do you market it, and who do you get it to, right? So I really like to separate these concepts in my mind. Awesome products are not necessarily good parents, and good parents are not necessarily good products. So don't ditch lines because they're not a product. And you will see this all the time in pedigrees. Most pedigrees have released lines in them. And there's a reason for that, right? They're good. But I think that what we want to do is we want to reduce the time period for a cycle of a generation. And I'm going to cruise through this because I've lost enough time here with this microphone. The breeding cycle is long, takes about 10 to 12 years to release a variety, and that's if everything works out pretty well. And you don't have to see it. It's just kind of a diagrammatic representation of the first year to the year 0 to year 11 and 12. Making crosses, purifying lines, testing them, so on and so forth. Here's our annual timeline, and this is the real challenge of a winter breeding program, and that's that we spend all of the fall planting. It gets in the ground. We're gonna have this waiting period where we're making crosses, we're doing releases and PVPs, and I try to teach some classes, and then we hit field season. We harvest, and then we have this very short period of time to do all of this stuff, right? We have to make selections. We're going to get all the grain clean. We're going to get it all into planting envelopes. It's got to all get weighed and treated and and then back into the ground in about 2.5 months. And that Virginia's kind of in a nice place because we have a little bit longer than say Minnesota or New York has, but it's still a challenge. And so, in interest of time, I'm kind of going to skip over this a little bit. Basically, when we're making crosses, we're trying to combine a lot of different genes, right? Single genes, but also quantitative traits. And that is a hard problem. And so what we've done is we built this big prediction model. Basically, we evaluate, right? You select some parents based on genetic information. Then what we do is we actually produce all of the possible crosses in silico. And once we produce them on the computer, then we can then evaluate them for their merit, right? Based on all of these different traits. And so this is what our yield or our wheat program looks like. We've got 23,000 yield plots, some 3,500 lines, 7,000 markers, whatever. And we can produce pretty good estimates of those family merits. We're working on this in barley. We've got more SNPs in barley because it's not a hexaploid. But fewer lines. Once we get this year's done, we'll be at about 2,000. And we genotype. So now what we're doing is we're genotyping everything that goes into first year yield trials. So everything has genotypes, which means, right, you get this. This is like a visual representation of like how you're going to make a decision on the cross, right? You've got males and females and all of these different traits that you have some predicted value for the family merit. And then you've got all of these single genes and you got to make some decision. Basically, we use a selection index to do this. And so on a given day, you can go into the greenhouse and say, which parents, which individuals are ready to cross. You subset this thing, and then you can make the best, predicted crosses for that day. And this is just this concept of using an index to do this kind of work. We're not really at the economic side of it yet. Like eventually what you want to do is you want to be selecting on dollars, not any other, component trait. You want to know what the economic value of those traits are. So we're not really there yet. I don't know if we're ever going to get there, but it's a goal. So we're really, we're trying to use these tools to get down to, drastically reducing the time it takes us to release. So we're widening that funnel and we're shortening the funnel so that we can recycle parents faster and we can get varieties out faster. And because that time frame is so short, the big issue that we have is that you have to be able to process all this data very quickly. And so we've really worked on building the foundational capacities to do that. Big project on these integrated digital field maps. They're all T3 friendly so that everything can be, built for these field maps, and then it can be exported into T3. It's all there for our database. It makes all the files we need for our harvest master and for printing stakes and all of that all automated so that we can turn this around faster. And we've also got data pipelines that are made to, so we can collect all this data in the field, either on Fieldbook or on the combine, dump it into one place, hit go, and it analyzes those, 300,000 data points in a minute and gives me all the summaries I got to send out. Anyone that collaborates with me knows that has not expedited me getting them their summaries. Not yet, although last year I was pretty quick. Right, so we do all of our genotype calling in-house. So this is good because every year we can update and we get raw sequence in and we can then produce value, genotype scores for everybody. This is a busy figure. I just wanted to highlight everywhere you see blue is places where we're using genomic information. So we're using genetic information for advancement at almost all stages of selection. And to some extent, even in late stages. Problem is, quality data, for example, comes in late in the season. You can't do same season selection for quality. So that's where using this genetic information, doing genomic prediction comes in. You can start predicting lines and advancing them based on quality measures. My student, Amelia, who recently graduated and went to NCSU, she did some work on this. We get good accuracies and they have good heritability. So this is something we should be able to do. And the final thing, and then I'll leave with this, is we're also using high throughput phenotyping to some extent. We're still trying to figure out how to incorporate this into an actual breeding program. But this is a slide from my postdoc, Felipe Sabagin, who's here. And we're using this stuff to characterize growth curves throughout the growing season. And then we're relating them to other traits. So here we're looking at patterns of growth. And these are what we do is we fit Legendre polynomials in a random regression model. And you get this kind of this average curve and then a deviation from the average curve. And you can kind of say, okay, at the end of the year, the highest yielding ones, right? We'll take the 10% highest yielding and contrast them to the 10% lowest yielding. And we see that their growth curves deviate, okay? And there's a lot of information here I don't have time to go into, but so there's a relationship between the shape of the growth curve throughout the entire growing season and these end-use traits. And so my student Amelia also did this with quality traits, and she saw some really interesting patterns where you would have high associations between these growth curves at certain parts of the growth period with some quality traits and not others, and then vice versa, right? So, beta-glucan is this pink line. Earlier stages of growth and development seem to be more related to beta-glucan in the end than later stages of development, which was not true for something like malt extract, which had an opposite type of a relationship. Not clear if this is like true genetics or we're just kind of looking at some kind of population structure effect here, but we're still working on this. I have a student who's here that's working on development of low GN and GN0 barley. Highly recommend you go talk with her. She's doing awesome work. So just a little plug for her. And I think I'm out of time. So this is the small grains crew. Like I said, once he retired, we couldn't do this work without them, and they're awesome folks. And my funders, obviously. And thank you to AMBA for having me here and providing us some funding.
I have one really good question. No pressure. Great job, handling that scorpion. And,
Yeah,
quick question on Ray, not first in the line.
right.
Is it, you know, it's Physogamous or Tasmanics?
I do not. Yeah. Yeah, we can talk about that later. Yeah. I do not.
Thank you. Nicholas will be around. We can.
Yeah. You all can come find me at some point. Okay, I'm gonna hand this hornet's nest. So